Rand, I need another episode of Fully Cinematic.
5 seasons in a movie. After 9 years as a weekly drama, the saga of the UK's most complicated law enforcement officers beating community to a feature-length story. London's Detective Chief Inspector John Luther is back, in a big-budget continuation of his struggles against criminals of all stripes, as well as Scotland Yard and the City of London Police. The titular sleuth's gone toe-to-toe with organized crime, lost his partner, become a widower, and suffered a nervous breakdown during the course of his duty. What else does he have to go through? We may as well find out together. So grab your passport, pull up your British slang app, and settle in as we take a trip across the pond in order to do a rundown of Luther Fallen's Son. And oh yeah, there will be spoilers. Like most mystery stories, the proceedings begin not with the headlining investigator, but with the crime victim, kidnapping in this case. After answering a call from a creepy stranger, teenager Callum Aldrich is abducted by said creeper on a dark and rainy street. After taking on the case, our hero fails to locate Callum and is charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison, which was all part of the kidnapper's plan. Following a very public fall from grace, the former DCI is jumped in the Bing shower by a vindictive group of inmates that he put away. Cut to the missing team's mom, Corinne, being lured to a large estate, inside which she finds Callum hanging amongst 7 other bodies, when her phone ignites, starting a blaze that consumes much of the room. DCI Odette Rain is put on the case shortly before Luther receives a kite that prompts him to tune the station's 65.8 FM on his radio, where the creeper reveals that he masterminded the former's downfall. Corinne visits JL in order to make him feel worse by calling him a liar. And as it turns out, Creepy gave her a ride to the pen. After the visit, Luther calls Rain on his cell in order to offer his expertise. But of course, he's rebuffed and even threatened with being tossed in the hole if he calls again. She also tips off the prison staff about Luther's android. Making matters worse, some of his former arrestees try to burn him alive during a riot. But Luther's no dummy, nor does he lack hands, so he survives long enough to be transferred and is broken free by his boys during the trip. The creeper turns out to be rich and the next time we see it, he's taunting/caring for his wife, who has severe burn injuries. Meanwhile, Luther's reunited with his trusty Volvo, which hasn't exactly been getting regular maintenance. Rain meets retired Detective Superintendent Martin Shank at a diner in order to ask him to stop his former star detective from getting himself murked. The bloke in question hits the streets in his trademark duster, trench coat, whatever, and impersonates a cop. After tracing the radio transmitter to a person of interest, he questions the guy black site style, stopping just short of drilling into his eye. This dirtbag reveals that he'd been catfished into forcefully getting another guy by surprise by someone who subsequently blackmailed him into doing more dirty business. Over on the swanky side of town, Richie Rich discusses his human trafficking operation with the minion. Meanwhile, Luther gives Shank a call, which the latter thoroughly expected. They end the chat by betting 50 quid that Shank will catch Luther before Luther bags the killer, which is funny considering that his old DSU proceeds to lend some helping info. That night in a packed Piccadilly circus, Rain's agents close in on Luther as he IDs and grabs Creepy. But like a Batman villain, he had an overly complicated contingency plan up his sleeve. Kidnap victims fall from rooftops, triggering a panic and distracting the crowd from looking his way, which allows him to lead Luther on a foot chase into the tube tunnels. The inevitable fight between the two, a knife fight at that, is interrupted by the arrival of a SWAT cop who gets too close, resulting in a stab from old Creepy. Luther's willingness to try to save his life results in one of his colleagues letting him go. But we soon learn that one of Rain's cops, Archie, is a blackmail victim. Luther, who was also stabbed, calls to check on the officer and is informed by Rain that he didn't make it. He then rolls out his theory. The Creepy's been luring his victims in via social media and hangs up on her before his location can be triangulated. Odette later calls to check on her teenage daughter, Anya, who's home alone. Or is she? A certain creepy voice lures her downstairs where she's grabbed by, I give you 3 guesses. Luther, meanwhile, pays Corinne a visit this time in order to pick her brain about Creeper's association with her son. Turns out he met Corinne in a grief support group, calling himself Tommy and claiming to be mourning a dead wife. As realization dawns on her, Tommy transports an unconscious Lil Rain by van somewhere in the city. He calls Mom, allowing her to hear Anya scream, and blackmails her into keeping his identity secret in exchange for not harming Junior. She caves and arranges to meet Luther one-on-one in order to take him in. Luther picks the meeting spot, a bar where Rain reveals the creeper is David Roby, a billionaire stock trader whose wife, Georgia, was severely burned in the fire. Deducing that she's been compromised, Stringer Bell convinces Odette that he can get Anya home safe. They visit Georgia, where Stacker Pentecost convinces her to divulge where her husband's going. Luther informs Shank that David's organized a Red Room, an entire network of secret accomplices. Rain drives the Volvo onto a ferry with Luther hiding in the trunk. When Archie gives David Rain's last known location, he sends him to take care of Georgia. Back on the road, Luther and Odette have a heart-to-heart en route to David. Unfortunately for Archie, Luther tips Shank off to the fact that David had a mole on the force, and he's waiting with backup when Archie shows up at George's to do the deed. But he injects himself with a syringe he brought before he can be arrested. Luther and Rain set off on a 1.5-mile trek through snow to another mansion containing what Odette initially believes is Anya's hanging corpse. On the way, Luther notices bodies under a frozen lake. When Odette realizes the corpse isn't Anya's, she's jumped from behind and knocked unconscious. The same thing happens to Luther as he roams the halls. When he's awakened by a torrent of water tied to a chair, he finds that he's the star of a Saw-like live stream hosted by the Joker. David Roby, with his face uncovered. Odette and Anya are the co-stars, of course. As the only option given for sparing her little girl, Rain stabs Luther on camera. In turn, he's told to shatter her left kneecap with a hammer. He refuses, and when he tells the audience that their addresses will be traced, most, if not all, log off. Catching a henchman by surprise, Luther chases after David while Odette frees Anya. She subsequently attacks one of the goons with a baseball bat, failing miserably to subdue him with it. But somehow, she eventually knocks him out with one punch before Jigsaw's trap can set the entire room ablaze.
No. What?
The room ignites anyway, killing the goon but not the Rains. The SUV cracks the ice, resulting in David being trapped as he tries to surface, while Shank's dive team saves Bloodsport, who's arrested on the spot before he can collect his winnings. He wakes up in a safe house where Shank divulges that he doubts he'll be remanded. As they step outside, an enigmatic MI6 type lets Heimdall know that his boss would like a word, and we fade to black before he can meet M. While star Idris Elba famously announced his intention to not accept the role of 007, the film features a shot of him overlooking the London skyline that closely resembles a shot from Skyfall. Luther and Shank make a good team, their previously adversarial relationship having long since evolved into a genuine camaraderie, though Shank still no DS Justin Ripley. While he no longer has a murderous, one-time quasi-nemesis turned ally in his life, Alice Morgan's death has left our genius-level detective no worse for wear. However, his story remains on the downward trajectory it began a couple of seasons ago. The increased budget shows on screen, but doesn't go much further than the visuals. The extra pounds sure didn't return the writing to its former glory. Maybe JL will get another bite at the apple one day, but for now, if you want to see Idris Elba get sprung from prison in order to unravel a shocking conspiracy while a girl boss with a short hairstyle breathes down his neck, skip this trash and watch The Suicide Squad instead. And if you still want to see him use his native accent in a high-octane adventure, check out Pacific Rim as well. In other news, it's time to check out some comments from other shows. After watching my early review for The Bad Guys, Jules Hinman said, "One difference is that The Bad Guys also has human characters and Zootopia does not. And Jules loves both films." Well, good for you, Jules. After catching my Shotgun Wedding early review, Octavia9464 said, "Thank you for telling the whole story to the movie. That is what everyone loves to hear, is for someone to tell you every detail of what happens in a movie you haven't even seen because it isn't even out for another week from now." What kind of person does that, in all caps? Well, you're welcome, genius. I gave an explicit spoiler warning at the beginning of the video. So I guess the real question is, What kind of person ignores a warning, then complains after getting exactly what said warning promised? Shout out to Jules, Hinman, and Octavia for dropping comments. And shout out to everybody who hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But I've had enough of this conversation and this movie, so I'm logging off.
Fully cinematic.